Gina barely had time to steady the certified envelope before the delivery driver said, "Ma'am, I just need one signature." She scribbled her name without taking her eyes off the return address. Dine Carter. Her mother. For 4 years, that name had existed only in old family photographs and unanswered memories. No birthday cards. No holiday calls. No explanation for disappearing from her daughter's life. Now, without warning, a certified envelope sat in Gina's hands. Her heart pounded. "Why now?" she whispered. The driver climbed back into his truck, leaving Gina standing alone on the porch. She almost tore the envelope open right there. Instead, she pressed it against her chest and hurried inside her grandmother Alina's estate. If anyone could tell her whether this meant hope or heartbreak, it was the woman who had quietly become the only parent she had left. Grandmother Alina looked up from the sitting room as Gina entered. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Gina held up the envelope. "I think I have." Alina's smile disappeared. She slowly stood, setting her reading glasses on the bridge of her nose. "The return address." Gina nodded. "It's Mom." Silence filled the room. For years, Gina had imagined dozens of versions of this moment. Maybe an apology. Maybe devastating news. Maybe an explanation for why the woman who raised her had suddenly vanished from her life without a single goodbye. "I've waited 4 years for this," Gina admitted quietly. "Maybe she's finally ready to tell me why." Her fingers found the letter opener lying on the side table. The metal blade slipped beneath the edge of the envelope. "Stop." The single word was calm. "Firm. Certain." Gina looked up. Alina wasn't watching her. She was staring at the envelope. "Grandma." "Don't open it." Confusion spread across Gina's face. "What do you mean?" Alina stepped closer, but never reached for it. Instead, she leaned forward, studying every inch of the certified mailing label. Her expression slowly hardened. She adjusted her glasses. "There is something wrong here." Gina forced out a nervous laugh. "It's just a certified letter." "No." Alina's voice remained steady. "It's pretending to be one." Gina frowned. "What are you seeing?" Alina pointed toward the clear address window. "The printing doesn't match." Gina leaned closer. She hadn't noticed. Then Alina traced a finger just above the mailing label. "The adhesive around this window has been replaced." Gina blinked. "What?" "And look here." She pointed again. "The alignment on the sender information is slightly off." Gina's heartbeat accelerated. "I don't understand." Alina's eyes never left the envelope. "Look closer." This time Gina did. Really looked. Her breathing stopped. The sender's address looked authentic. Her mother's handwriting looked authentic. Even the certified label appeared official. But tucked beside the barcode, partially hidden beneath the mailing sticker, was the corner of another page. A page that clearly hadn't been folded with the rest of the documents. Someone had inserted something after the envelope had already been prepared. Gina slowly looked back at Alina. Her voice barely escaped. "Why would Mom hide that?" Gina couldn't stop staring at the hidden edge of paper beneath the mailing label. "I almost opened this without looking," she whispered. Alina nodded. That's exactly what whoever prepared it expected. The older woman carefully carried the envelope to the dining table, beneath the brightest chandelier in the house. "Bring me the magnifying glass." Gina retrieved it from the nearby cabinet, watching as Alina examined every corner without disturbing the seal. Several long seconds passed. Finally, Alina exhaled. "See this?" She angled the envelope toward Gina. At first, Gina saw nothing unusual. Then it became obvious. The address printed across the front used 2 slightly different fonts. The change was so subtle it disappeared, unless someone looked closely. That's strain. It gets stranger. Alina pointed toward the transparent window. The first page is bright white. Gina nodded. The page behind it isn't. Sure enough, a cream-colored sheet rested behind the visible document. It wasn't the same paper. Not even close. Wouldn't that happen if different pages were printed at different times? Gina asked. It could. Alina looked directly at her granddaughter. Or it could mean someone inserted another page after the packet was assembled. A chill crawled across Gina's shoulders. She remembered sitting beside her mother at the kitchen table years earlier. Just sign here. I want to read it first. You don't need to read everything. I'd rather understand. I'm your mother. Back then, Diane had laughed every concern away until Gina eventually stopped asking questions altogether. School forms, bank papers, insurance updates. Every signature had been rushed. Every hesitation dismissed. The memory suddenly felt less innocent. You think she's doing the same thing again? Gina asked quietly. Alina answered with another question. When was the last time your mother contacted you? Gina swallowed. 4 years ago. And since then, nothing. No birthday. Gina shook her head. No Christmas. Another shake. No phone calls. No. Alina rested her hand gently over Gina's. People rarely return after 4 years of silence because they've suddenly discovered kindness. The words hurt because they sounded true. But what if, Gina hesitated, what if she really wants to apologize? Alina smiled sadly. I hope she does. She glanced at the envelope. But hope should never replace caution. Gina stared at the unopened seal. Every part of her wanted answers. Maybe there was an explanation. Maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe today would finally heal something that had stayed broken for years. Her fingers slowly reached toward the edge of the envelope. Alina quietly placed her hand over it. Wait. For what? Our estate attorney is already coming this afternoon. Gina sighed. That feels ridiculous. It may. But if this is exactly what it appears to be. She paused. Waiting costs you nothing. And if it isn't, waiting still costs you nothing. After several long seconds, Gina slid the envelope across the table toward Alina. Okay. I'll wait. Relief briefly crossed Alina's face. Then Gina's phone vibrated. Unknown number. She hesitated before pressing play. Her mother's voice immediately filled the room. Gina, whatever you do, don't listen to anyone else. Gina froze. You need to open that certified envelope today. The message continued. I'm serious. Open it immediately. A brief pause. Then Diane spoke one final sentence. Don't let anyone talk you out of signing. The front doorbell rang less than 20 minutes later. Alina glanced at the grandfather clock. Right on time. She opened the door to welcome Richard Lawson, the estate attorney who had represented her family for more than 20 years. Richard shook Gina's hand before setting his leather briefcase on the dining room table. I understand you wanted to review the revised estate documents before we finalize anything. Alina nodded. We will. She looked toward the certified envelope. But something else arrived first. Richard immediately noticed the unopened mailing. A legal notice. We're not sure. Gina slid the envelope toward him. It came from my mother. The same daughter who hasn't contacted anyone in 4 years, Alina asked. Richard looked surprised. I didn't know she had reached out. Neither did we. Before anyone could say another word, another knock echoed through the house. The room fell silent. Alina opened the door. Standing outside was Diane Carter. She wore a warm smile that seemed completely disconnected from the years of silence she had created. "Mom," Gina whispered. Diane stepped inside as though nothing had happened. "There you are." Without asking permission, she walked toward Gina and wrapped her in a quick embrace. "I've missed you." Gina stood frozen. She didn't hug her back. Richard quietly watched the exchange. "So," Diane said brightly, spotting the envelope on the table, "you haven't opened it yet." "No," Gina answered carefully. "I wanted to wait." "For what?" Elinor stepped beside her granddaughter. "For legal advice." The smile on Diane's face faded almost instantly. "Oh." She forced another laugh. "That's really unnecessary." Richard spoke politely. "I'm Richard Lawson." "Diane." "I serve as Mrs. Carter's estate attorney." Diane's shoulders stiffened almost imperceptibly. "It's just personal paperwork." Richard smiled. "Then you won't mind if I take a quick look before anyone signs." "I would, actually." The room became quiet. Diane immediately corrected herself. "I mean, it's private." Elinor folded her arms. "You disappeared for 4 years. You mail my granddaughter certified legal documents. And now you object to an attorney looking at them." Diane looked toward Gina instead. "Honey, don't make this bigger than it is. It's simply paperwork, acknowledging a few family matters." Gina frowned. "What family matters?" "I explain everything inside." "Then why not tell me now?" Diane hesitated. "You'll understand once you read it." Richard rested one hand lightly on the envelope. "With everyone's permission, I can simply verify the documents before Miss Carter reviews them." "No." The answer came far too quickly. Every head turned toward Diane. Realizing how harsh she sounded, she forced another smile. "I just think Gina deserves to read her own mother's letter first." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "I agree." Relief briefly crossed Diane's face. He continued. "After I verify that the paperwork matches the documents referenced inside." Her expression collapsed. Elinor quietly asked the question no one else wanted to voice. "Diane, why are you so afraid of someone reading it first?" "I'm not afraid." "Then why are your hands shaking?" Diane instinctively hid them behind her purse. Richard finally lifted the envelope and examined the reference numbers printed beneath the certified barcode. His eyes narrowed. Everyone watched him. He adjusted his glasses and looked again. "Mrs. Carter." He turned toward Elinor. "These reference numbers don't correspond to the legal forms listed on the cover page." Gina felt her stomach tighten. "What does that mean?" Richard slowly looked back at Diane. "It means..." He carefully placed the envelope back onto the table. "I have reason to believe pages inside this packet have been substituted." The room went completely silent. Diane took one hurried step toward the envelope. Richard calmly raised his hand. "No one signs anything." His voice became firmer. "Not until I know exactly what's inside." The room remained perfectly still. No one reached for the envelope. No one spoke. Richard Lawson slipped on a pair of thin cotton gloves from his briefcase before carefully breaking the certified seal. "I'm opening this as evidence," he said calmly. "No one touches anything until we're finished." Diane forced a laugh. "Evidence? Richard, you're acting like I've committed a crime." "I sincerely hope you haven't." He slid the documents onto the polished dining table. The first page appeared ordinary. A short personal letter. A polite greeting. Nothing alarming. Gina looked at her mother. "This doesn't seem unusual." Diane smiled for the first time since entering the house. "I told you. You've all embarrassed yourselves over nothing." Richard didn't answer. Instead, he continued removing the remaining pages one by one. The second document appeared to be an acknowledgement form. The title sounded harmless. Receipt of Family Estate Communication. See, Diane said. It's simply confirming Gina received information. Richard quietly read every line. Then he stopped. His eyes settled on a paragraph near the bottom. Oh, Alina immediately noticed. What is it? Richard didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened his briefcase and removed a thick binder. My copy of Mrs. Carter's current estate file. He found the corresponding document, placed both versions side by side, then looked at Gina. I need you to notice something. She leaned over the table. They look identical. They're supposed to. Richard pointed toward paragraph 7. Read this sentence. Gina read aloud. The undersigned acknowledges receipt of all estate communications and voluntarily relinquishes any present or future beneficial interest arising from subsequent testamentary amendments. She frowned. I don't understand. You aren't supposed to. Richard slid the official version beside it. Now read paragraph 7 on the original. Gina's eyes widened. The wording was completely different. Instead of surrendering inheritance rights, the authentic document merely confirmed that the recipient had received informational correspondence. Nothing more. Someone had replaced the entire paragraph, without changing the page number, without changing the formatting, without changing the heading. Only the legal language buried in the middle had changed. Gina slowly looked up. If I had signed. Richard nodded. You would have signed away every future claim connected to your grandmother's estate. Silence crashed over the room. Gina's knees weakened. I almost. She couldn't finish the sentence. Diane immediately stepped forward. This is ridiculous. It was a drafting mistake. Richard calmly looked at her. A drafting mistake doesn't selectively replace inheritance language. It wasn't me. You mailed it. I didn't prepare it. Alina spoke for the first time in nearly a minute. Then who did? Diane opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Richard continued comparing the documents. There are more inconsistencies. He turned another page. The margins don't match. Another page. The font spacing changes halfway through. Another. The metadata references a completely different template. Diane's breathing became noticeably faster. Richard carefully stacked the altered papers separately. I've seen forged estate packets before. He looked directly at Diane. They all make the same mistake. What mistake? Gina asked. They imitate appearance. He tapped the substituted pages. But they never perfectly imitate origin. Alina walked to the wall safe built into her study. A moment later, she returned carrying the sealed originals of every estate amendment completed over the past year. Richard compared each one. Every authentic document matched. Every altered clause appeared only inside Diane's packet. There is no question anymore, Richard said quietly. The substitution was deliberate. Diane suddenly lunged toward the table. Give those back. She grabbed for the papers. Richard pulled them away just in time. No. They belong to me. They now constitute potential evidence. You have no right. I do. His voice became firm. Attempting to retrieve altered legal documents only makes this situation worse. Diane turned toward the front door. I'm leaving. Alina stepped directly into the doorway. For the first time that afternoon, the 80-year-old woman looked every bit the formidable businesswoman who had spent decades building her fortune. No. Diane stopped. You don't walk away from this. Richard carefully placed every altered page into an evidence sleeve before reaching for his phone. He looked at Diane one final time. Please sit down. His expression hardened. This meeting is no longer about an inheritance. Richard placed his phone back on the table after making a brief call. No one is leaving until these documents are properly secured. Diane folded her arms. You can't keep me here. No, Richard replied evenly. But I can advise everyone present not to release evidence connected to a suspected fraudulent document. The confidence Diane had walked in with was gone. She looked at Gina instead. Honey, you're really going to believe them over your own mother. Gina didn't answer immediately. She looked down at the altered pages spread across the dining table. 4 years. 4 birthdays. 4 Christmas mornings. 4 years of wondering whether she'd done something so terrible that her own mother had erased her from her life. And now, the very first thing Diane had sent her wasn't an explanation. It wasn't an apology. It was paperwork. Tell me one thing, Gina finally said. Diane straightened. If this was really about reconnecting. She held up the personal letter Richard had removed from the envelope. Why wasn't this enough? Diane hesitated. What do you mean? You wrote 2 pages about missing me. Gina's voice remained calm. But you hid legal documents behind them. Silence. You could have mailed only the letter. Still nothing. You could have called. Nothing. You could have knocked on my door. Diane lowered her eyes. You didn't. Richard quietly slid the genuine estate document beside the altered version once more. For everyone's understanding, here's exactly what happened. He pointed to the authentic page. This document simply acknowledges receipt of estate communications. Then he tapped the altered one. This version quietly removes Miss Carter as a beneficiary of any future amendments to Mrs. Carter's estate. He looked around the room. The title remained identical. The page numbers remained identical. The formatting was intentionally copied. But one paragraph was replaced. Elinor slowly nodded. So if Gina had signed. Richard finished the thought. She would have voluntarily surrendered every future inheritance right connected to your estate. Gina closed her eyes. The realization hit harder than she expected. She hadn't almost lost money. She had almost signed away the final gift her grandmother wanted to leave her. Not because she trusted a stranger. Because she trusted her mother. A tear rolled down her cheek. I spent 4 years hoping you missed me. She looked directly at Diane. But you only missed my signature. Diane's expression cracked. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Richard immediately looked up. What wasn't? She covered her mouth. Too late. The words had escaped. Richard spoke carefully. Mrs. Carter. Did someone help prepare these documents? Diane sat heavily in her chair. Her shoulders slumped. After nearly a full minute of silence, she whispered. I asked someone to help. Who? A document preparer. Licensed. She slowly shook her head. I didn't think. No, Elinor interrupted. You didn't care. The room became painfully quiet. Richard organized every altered page into protective evidence sleeves. I'll be submitting these for examination. He looked toward Diane. If the investigation confirms intentional document substitution, there will be legal consequences. Diane stared at the table. I never wanted to hurt Gina. Gina gave a sad smile. You disappeared for 4 years. You mailed me a trap. You only came today because you were afraid I wouldn't sign it. She shook her head. You stopped being honest long before today. Weeks later, investigators confirmed the documents had been intentionally altered before mailing. The document preparer admitted Diane had instructed him to create paperwork that appeared routine while inserting language waiving Gina's inheritance rights. The evidence Richard preserved proved decisive, and the fraudulent packet never had any legal effect. Under the anti-fraud provision Elinor had insisted on adding to her estate years earlier, Any beneficiary who deliberately attempted to manipulate or interfere with another person's inheritance automatically forfeited their own share. Diane didn't just fail to gain control. She lost everything she had expected to inherit. When the estate was eventually settled, Alina appointed Gina as executor. "You protected this family when someone else tried to exploit it," she told her granddaughter. "That's exactly who should carry out my wishes." The relatives who had once seen Gina as quiet and overly trusting now looked to her whenever an important decision had to be made. They admired the restraint she had shown, refusing to act out of anger even after learning the truth. Several months later, Gina established the Alina Carter Scholarship, helping first-generation college students who had been abandoned or unsupported by their families. It was the kind of legacy her grandmother had always hoped to leave behind. The certified envelope remained locked inside a small fireproof file cabinet in Gina's office. She never opened it again. She never needed to. Whenever she saw it, she remembered the lesson that had changed her life forever. Not every envelope carries the message you think it does. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's having someone who loves you enough to say, "Hold on. Look closer." As Gina quietly locked the cabinet one final time, she realized the most valuable thing her grandmother had given her was not a fortune. It was the wisdom to question appearances before trusting the people who once taught her never to question them.